Okay, here we go. This is area of study 2, culture and ethnicity. PowerPoint number 2. Make sure to write down all the notes that are in white text. So, race in early Australia. Obviously, as we remember, the Australian colonies all voted to federate into one country, starting on the 1st of January 1901. First issues discussed by that new Australian Parliament were all about race, though. So they talked about cultural identity, skin colour, race, and ethnicity. Now, there's quite a few different new words to learn for this area of study, so I want you to pause this now and go and spend 10 or 15 minutes playing the quizlet right there. You should be playing that quizlet probably 10 minutes a week, I would say. So here's the Immigration Restriction Act right now. That's the first act that was passed by the new country called Australia in 1901, and it was an act that was used to basically keep non-white immigrants out of Australia. Bummer. Here is this is a song that they wrote about the great national policy called White Australia. Remember, it started in 1901 and wasn't dismantled until starting in the 40s right up until 1973 when the last remnant of the White Australia policy was removed. And they wrote a song about it. Nice. Australia, the white man's land. So if you're not a white man, you're being left out there. Bummer. So, race in early Australia. Now, as mentioned in the video, the Crash Course Sociology video on culture and ethnicity, which I suggest you watch if you haven't already, they mention the fact that actually the lines between what makes one race a race is pretty arbitrary, a bit random, So your skin color determines what race you are, but your eye color doesn't. If you've got black frizzy hair, you might be part of a different race than someone with straight blonde hair, but the length of your legs or the size of your ears doesn't matter for race, so it's a bit random. Now, these physical differences that are considered important for race, mostly skin color, are often used to stereotype, which means label, or ostracize, which means to exclude people. Try and use those fancy words, arbitrary, stereotype, and ostracize when you're writing responses. So, race in early Australia. Obviously, the white settlers said that they were culturally superior to Indigenous Australians, and the category of race was used by whites to dominate others. So, obviously, the category of race was used by whites to dominate Indigenous people to start with, and then it was used to dominate what were called Kanakas, so that's Pacific Islanders who came to Queensland to pick fruit, and Chinese people who came starting in the 1850s for the gold rushes. Other cultures were ignored, so they weren't considered part of the national myth, or they might be assimilated, which means forced to become the same. So obviously the most glaring example of assimilation policy in Australia was the stolen generations, where Indigenous children, particularly of those of mixed race parents, would be forcibly removed from their families and made to go and live with white families, the idea being that that would turn them into white people, assimilate them. So here's a really old-fashioned example of how people used to see race. They imagined that there were all these different races and they could be distinguished from each other. And of course, because this is made by a white man, you've got the white man in the middle and everyone's compared to him, usually unfavourably. However, have a look at this picture right here. Here's people of all different races, going from what you'd call white or Caucasian through Asian to dark-skinned or African. And the question really is, you have a look at the dividing lines there, and it's really hard to distinguish one race from another. So, your reflection activity. Do this in your exercise book. I just want you to come up with, imagine you're writing a headline for a newspaper, come up with a really catchy headline that summarises today's lesson. Your homework, got 2 bits of homework. First thing, I want you to define in your own words. Don't use the definitions that have been given to you or in the textbook or from a dictionary. Define in your own words those 3 words: race, ethnicity, and culture. Obviously, there's going to be a pretty big overlap between them, I would say. The other thing I want you to do for homework is just 1 dot point for each. I want you to write non-Indigenous Australian culture, and I want you to list 1 thing under each heading. So what's 1 national dance in Australia, 1 national food, national dress, and so on. Yay! Thanks.